Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling something that sounds a bit academic, but trust me, it's got huge implications for how we think about technology. We're talking about machine ethos.
It's a fascinating concept. We usually think of ethos in the context of human speakers, right?
Right.
Like how trustworthy is a politician? How much does that doctor really know? But applying that to machine, that's where things get interesting.
It's like, can my phone really have character? Our source material for this deep dive is an academic article called A Machine's Ethos, an inquiry into artificial ethos and trust. And just to make sure we're all on the same page, let's define what ethos actually means.
Simply put, ethos is about how believable and trustworthy we find someone, or in this case, something. It's based on how we perceive their expertise, their character, and their intentions towards us.
So it's not just about whether a machine spits out the right answer. It's about whether we believe it's giving us the right answer for the right reasons.
Exactly.
That makes me think about all the times I've blindly followed GPS directions, even when they seemed a bit off.
That's a perfect example. And that blind trust, or maybe overtrust, is a big part of what this research article is getting at. The author argues that machines, especially as AI becomes more advanced, can actually cultivate this sense of ethos, almost like a good public speaker knows how to win over an audience.
Are we saying that my Roomba is trying to persuade me of something?
Maybe not consciously, but its design and programming can absolutely influence how you perceive it. Think about it. If your Roomba bumps into things constantly, you're going to think it's clumsy, not very intelligent. But if it navigates smoothly and efficiently, you're more likely to see it as capable, even clever.
That's true. I've totally cursed out my Roomba before when it got stuck under the couch.
Yeah.
So it's not just about the machine's actual capabilities. It's about how those capabilities are presented to us, how they make us feel about the machine.
Exactly.
And this is where things get really interesting because the author draws parallels between how a skilled speaker builds ethos and how a well-designed machine does the same.
Yes.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example. How can a machine be like a smooth-talking politician trying to win our votes?
Well, let's take the example of voice assistants like Siri or Alexa. They're programmed to be helpful and polite, using a pleasant tone of voice. They might even crack a joke or two, make you feel like you're interacting with a friendly personality. All of that contributes to their ethos, making you more likely to trust them and use them more often.
It makes total sense. It's like I wouldn't trust a voice assistant that sounded bored or sarcastic. But wait, isn't there a danger here? Like, what if companies exploit this machine ethos to get us to do things that aren't in our best interest?
That's a great question. And it's one of the ethical considerations we'll definitely explore later. But for now, let's stick with the mechanics of how machine ethos is built. The article breaks it down into 3 core components. Think of them as the pillars of machine trustworthiness.
What are these pillars?
And the first pillar is intelligence or expertise. Basically, this is about how capable and knowledgeable the machine seems to be. If we're going to trust a machine's advice or recommendations, it needs to project a certain level of competence.
I'm not going to trust a medical diagnosis from an app that looks like it was designed by a 5-year-old.
Right.
So expertise is key.
Yes.
What's the next pillar?
The second pillar is character or integrity. This is about whether the machine appears honest, reliable, and trustworthy. Does it do what it says it's going to do?
Right.
Does it seem fair and impartial?
It's not enough for a machine to be smart.
Right.
It also needs to be perceived as acting ethically. Like it's not trying to pull a fast one. How algorithms can perpetuate societal prejudices.
That's exactly right. And that ties into the machine's perceived character. If a company is known for shady practices or discriminatory algorithms, that's going to damage the trustworthiness of their AI products, no matter how intelligent those products may seem.
Like how we judge a person's character based on their past actions, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got expertise and integrity. What's the third pillar of machine ethos?
The third pillar is goodwill or benevolence. This is about whether the machine is perceived as having our best interests at heart. It's not enough to be capable and honest. We also want to feel like the machine is on our side, that it's not going to use its knowledge to manipulate or exploit us.
How can a machine, which is essentially a bunch of code, actually have goodwill?
You're right, it's a tricky concept, but think about it in terms of design choices. A chatbot that's designed to be overly pushy or aggressive is going to feel less benevolent than one that's patient and understanding.
Right.
Even if they're both trying to achieve the same goal.
Okay, so it's about how the machine's intentions are perceived, even if those intentions are just a product of human programming.
Right.
This is making me rethink how I interact with technology.
I'm guessing there's more to this whole machine ethos thing, right? It's not just about these three pillars.
There's a lot more to unpack. For instance, a machine's ethos isn't static. It can change over time.
Based on our interactions with it. Think of introductory ethos as our first impression of a machine. It's based on what we know about it before we even interact with it.
So things like the company's reputation, reviews we've read, maybe even news stories about how the AI was developed.
All of that forms our initial perception, our introductory ethos. But then as we start using the machine, that perception can evolve. That's where derived ethos comes in.
So derived ethos is based on our actual experiences with the machine.
Precisely. It's shaped by how the machine behaves, how it communicates with us, how well it adapts to our preferences. And here's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
The authors argue that this process of building derived ethos is directly linked to the ancient concept of the canons of rhetoric.
Wait, hold on. Are we talking about those rules of persuasion developed by ancient Greek philosophers?
Yes.
What do those have to do with AI?
That's where this deep dive takes a fascinating turn. It turns out those ancient strategies for effective communication are incredibly relevant to how machines present themselves and build trust. We've got a lot more to explore, so buckle up.
My mind is officially blown.
Yeah.
We're talking about ancient Greek rhetoric and AI in the same breath.
It's fascinating stuff.
This is why I love the deep dive. But before we get too deep into those ancient strategies, let's rewind for a second. You mentioned that a machine's ethos can change over time based on our interactions with it. How does that actually work?
Think of it this way. Every interaction you have with a machine is an opportunity for it to build or erode trust. Let's say you're using a language learning app, for example. If the app consistently provides accurate translations, gives you helpful feedback, and adjusts its difficulty level to match your progress, you're going to start trusting its expertise. You might even feel a sense of camaraderie, like you're learning alongside a supportive partner.
It's like when you find a study buddy who's both smart and encouraging, you're more likely to stick with it when you feel that connection. And that feeling of connection is a big part of derived ethos. The machine isn't just a tool anymore. It's almost like a companion in your learning journey. But here's the flip side. Let's say that same language learning app starts making frequent errors, gives you irrelevant feedback, or even bombards you with annoying notifications. Suddenly they're less like a study buddy and more like that friend who keeps distracting you with memes.
Those negative experiences chip away at the app's derived ethos. You start to question its expertise, its reliability, maybe even its motives.
Trust is built on consistent positive interaction, and it can be broken by negative experiences.
For sure.
Even if those experiences are unintentional. This makes me wonder if companies know that machines can build ethos. Are they actively designing them to be more persuasive?
That's a great question, and the answer is most likely yes. It would be naive to think that companies aren't aware of the power of machine ethos. Think about how much effort goes into designing those friendly voice assistants we talked about earlier, or how personalized recommendations on streaming platforms are designed to keep you hooked.
It's like the whole field of user experience design is in a way about manipulating machine ethos.
That might be a bit strong.
Okay.
But there's certainly an element of persuasion involved, and that brings us back to those ancient Greek canons of rhetoric, which, believe it or not, can provide a framework for understanding how machines build ethos.
Okay, I'm all ears. Break it down for me. How can these ancient rules of persuasion be applied to, say, my smart refrigerator?
Well, let's start with the first canon, which is called invention. In classical rhetoric, this refers to the process of coming up with arguments and supporting them with evidence in the context of machine ethos.
Yeah.
It's about how a machine selects and presents information to build credibility.
So it's not just about what the machine knows. It's about how it chooses what to tell us and how it backs up its claims.
Think about a news aggregator app that uses AI to curate articles for you. If that app consistently recommends articles from reputable sources, presents a balanced range of perspectives, and maybe even flags potential biases, you're going to see it as a trustworthy source of information.
But if it keeps feeding me clickbait headlines and articles from questionable websites, I'm going to lose trust pretty quickly.
That's how the way information is selected and presented plays a role in shaping machine ethos. Now let's move on to the second canon, which is arrangement.
Okay, so invention is about the content itself. What's arrangement about?
Arrangement is about how that content is structured and organized to be more persuasive. Think about how a good storyteller knows how to build suspense, create emotional connections, and leave you wanting more.
It's like the difference between reading a dry textbook and getting lost in a good novel.
And just like a skilled storyteller, a well-designed machine can use arrangement to enhance its ethos.
Can you give me a concrete example of how that might work?
Imagine a fitness tracker that's designed to motivate you to exercise more. Instead of just displaying cold, hard data about your steps and calories burned, it might use storytelling techniques. It might create a virtual map of your progress, showing you conquering virtual mountains or crossing finish lines.
It could even give me virtual high fives from my friends.
By framing your fitness journey as an exciting adventure, the tracker is using arrangement to make you more engaged and motivated.
It's like turning exercise into a game. So we've covered invention and arrangement. What's the third canon of rhetoric?
The third canon is style. This one gets interesting because it's about the machine's personality, its voice, its overall aesthetic.
It's like how some people have a natural charisma that makes them more persuasive, even if they're not saying anything particularly profound.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just like humans, machines can have distinct styles that contribute to their ethos. Think about the difference between a chatbot that uses formal language and one that's more casual and playful.
Or how some voice assistants have a very soothing voice, while others sound more energetic.
Those stylistic choices influence how we perceive the machine and how much we trust it.
This is making me realize that machine ethos is everywhere. It's not just about robots and AI. It's about how all kinds of technologies are designed to influence our perceptions and behaviors.
And we're not done yet. There's one more canon of rhetoric to explore. It's a big one: delivery. Delivery is about the overall presentation, the way the message is conveyed. In classical rhetoric, this includes things like the speaker's tone of voice, body language, their use of pauses and emphasis.
So it's not just what you say,
right?
It's how you say it.
And even though machines don't have bodies in the traditional sense, they still have ways of delivering their message.
Give me an example. How can a machine have body language?
Think about a robot designed to assist elderly patients in a nursing home. If that robot moves too quickly or makes jerky movements, it might seem intimidating or even dangerous. But if it moves slowly and gracefully, makes eye contact, and uses gentle gestures, it will appear more trustworthy and approachable.
It's like the robot equivalent of bedside manner.
And that's how delivery plays into machine ethos. It's about creating a sense of presence and personality that aligns with the desired level of trust and credibility.
This whole conversation is blowing my mind. It's like we've taken this seemingly simple concept of machine ethos and uncovered this whole hidden world of persuasion and influence.
And we're not done yet. We've explored how machine ethos is built, but now we need to grapple with the big question: what are the implications of all this?
How does machine ethos change the game when it comes to our relationship with technology?
That's the big question.
Because it's one thing to say, oh, my room is kind of cute and seems to know what it's doing. It's another thing entirely to think about AI systems that are making decisions about healthcare finances, even justice systems.
As AI becomes more integrated into these critical areas of our lives, the stakes of machine ethos get much, much higher. It's no longer just about whether we trust a machine to give us accurate driving directions. It's about whether we trust it to make life-altering decisions.
Okay, so let's dive into some specific examples. Where are we already seeing this play out, and what potential pitfalls should we be watching out for?
Let's start with something that affects everyone: the news and information we consume. We already rely heavily on algorithms to filter and curate the news we see online.
Oh yeah, my social media feeds are basically curated by algorithms at this point.
Exactly. Now imagine, those algorithms are designed to not just show you content you'll find engaging, but also content that subtly nudges your opinions or beliefs in a certain direction.
That's a bit unsettling.
Right.
Like, how would I even know if that was happening? It could be so subtle.
That's the danger, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing to choose to follow certain news outlets or commentators who align with your views. It's another thing entirely to have your entire information diet manipulated without your conscious awareness.
So it's not just about freedom of speech, it's about freedom of thought. Are we at risk of losing control of our own critical thinking abilities if we become too reliant on machines that are essentially programmed to persuade us?
It's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And it's not just about news. Think about the healthcare industry. AI is already being used to assist doctors in diagnosing diseases and recommending treatments.
AI can process huge amounts of data and spot patterns that humans might miss.
But what if those AI systems are biased in ways we don't fully understand? What if they're more likely to recommend certain treatments because of a patient's socioeconomic status or race, even if those factors shouldn't be considered?
It's like the algorithmic version of medical discrimination.
Exactly. And it highlights why machine ethos is so crucial in these high-stakes contexts. It's not enough for these AI systems to be intelligent.
Yeah.
They need to be demonstrably fair.
So we need to be able to trust not just the machine's output, but the entire process that led to that output.
Precisely. And that requires a level of scrutiny and regulation that we're only just beginning to grapple with as a society.
This is giving me a lot to think about. It seems like the more powerful AI becomes, the more important it is to have these conversations about ethics, transparency, and accountability.
I completely agree. And it's not just about regulations and oversight. It's also about individual empowerment. We need to become more aware of how machines are designed to influence us.
So we need to be more critical consumers of technology, not just in terms of what we buy, but also in terms of how we interact with and interpret the information we receive from machines.
Exactly. We need to develop a healthy skepticism, a willingness to question the machine's motives and critically evaluate its output, even if it's presented in a way that seems persuasive or authoritative.
It's almost like we need a new set of digital literacy skills. Not just to understand how to use technology,
Right.
but to understand how technology is being used to influence us.
I think you've hit on something really important. We need to be proactive, not reactive. We can't just passively accept whatever the machine tells us. We need to demand transparency, hold companies accountable, and educate ourselves and others about the potential risks and benefits of this incredibly powerful technology.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. I'm starting to see machine ethos everywhere I look, from the personalized ads on my phone to the way my smart speaker responds to my questions.
Awareness is the first step. Once you start seeing how machines are designed to persuade us, you can start making more informed choices about how you interact with them.
So to wrap things up, what's the key takeaway for our listeners?
If I had to boil it down to one sentence, it would be this. Don't underestimate the power of machines to persuade you, and don't relinquish your own critical thinking abilities.
That's great advice. It's a reminder that even though AI is changing the game, we still have the power to shape that game and ensure that it benefits humanity as a whole.
It's a future we're creating together, one line of code and one conscious choice at a time.
This has been an incredible deep dive, and I think we've only scratched the surface of this fascinating topic. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another exploration of the ideas that are shaping our world.